Malik Jackson slumped in the back seat of Officer Victor Hensley's patrol car, the cold steel of the handcuffs gnawing at his wrists, leaving red welts on his dark skin. Blood crusted under his nose, a bitter tang mixing with the stale air as the vehicle jolted over Chicago's potholed streets. His ribs throbbed where Hensley's baton had landed, each breath a sharp reminder of the beating he'd taken outside that grimy dive bar on West Roosevelt Road. He kept his eyes fixed on the scratched partition ahead, replaying the night in his head, piecing together how it all went sideways so fast. He'd been working an undercover op for months, infiltrating a drug ring run by a shadowy figure known only as Ghost. Tonight was supposed to be routine. Sit outside the bar, sip a soda, watch for a drop. No noise, no trouble. Then Hensley rolled. Up, all swagger and squinting eyes, and clocked him as a threat before he'd even set the glass down. Through the partition, Hensley's bulk filled the driver's seat, his meaty hands gripping the wheel. A buzz cut framed his thick neck, and as he shifted, Malik caught a glimpse of ink peeking from his sleeve, a Confederate flag, faded but unmistakable. The cop's voice cut through the hum of the engine, loud and jagged. "You punks think you own these streets, huh? Running dope, stealing cars, whatever else you animals get up to. Not on my watch." He spat the words, venom dripping from every syllable, his gaze flicking to the rearview mirror. Malik met it, unflinching, his face a mask of calm despite the fire in his chest. Hensley's lip curled. "What's that look for, huh? Think you're tough? I'll clean this city up one piece of trash at a time, starting with you." Malik stayed silent, jaw tight. He knew the game. One wrong word, and Hensley'd twist it into resisting. He'd seen it before, worked cases on it. Cops. Like this didn't need evidence, just a hunch and a badge. His mind raced back to the op. Ghost's crew moved product through that bar, a crumbling joint called the Rusty Anchor. All chipped paint and neon flickering Bud Light. Malik had posed as a low-level runner, feeding intel to his handler at the FBI's Chicago field office. Tonight, a courier was due with a sample, pure Colombian uncut worth 50 grand on the street. He'd been close, so close when Hensley's cruiser screeched up, lights flashing, and the cop barreled out, baton already swinging. No questions, no warnings, just a barked, "Hands up," and then pain. The car lurched to a stop outside the 12th District Precinct, a squat brick building with bars on the windows and a faint smell of piss lingering in the air. Hensley yanked the door open, grabbing Malik's arm and hauling him out. "Move it!" he growled, shoving him toward the entrance. Malik stumbled, catching himself, the cuffs biting deeper. Inside, the precinct buzzed with late-night chaos. A drunk hollering in a holding cell, a desk sergeant scribbling reports, a flickering fluorescent bulb casting stark shadows. Hensley marched him past it all, boots thudding on the scuffed linoleum, straight to booking. "Got a live one?" he called to the sergeant, a wiry guy with a mustache who barely glanced up. "Caught him loitering outside the Rusty Anchor, probably dealing. Fits the profile." Malik's stomach twisted. Profile. He'd heard that word. Too many times. Seen it scrawled in case files, whispered in courtrooms. Black, male, over 6 feet, breathing while in the wrong zip code. That's all it took for Hensley. The sergeant nodded, tossing a plastic bag on the counter. "Empty your pockets." Malik complied, slow and deliberate, sliding out a worn wallet with a fake ID, Darius Wells, 38, no record, and a few crumpled bucks. Hensley snatched the ID, squinting at it like it offended him. "Darius, huh? Cute. Looks like garbage to me." He chucked it into the bag, smirking. "We'll run it. Bet it's fake. Bet you've got warrants a mile long." Malik bit his tongue, watching Hensley strut like he'd cracked the case of the century. The cop didn't know that ID was crafted by the feds, airtight down to the holograms. He didn't know Malik had clearance higher than anyone in this dump. One call to his handler, and this would blow up in Hensley's face. But that call would torch his cover, expose the op, maybe get him killed by Ghost's crew. So he stayed, quiet, letting Hensley's smugness fill the room. The sergeant logged the bag, muttering about backlog, while Hensley leaned close, breath hot with coffee and spite. "You're mine now, Darius. Gonna lock you up tight. Justice don't sleep." "Justice." Malik almost laughed, the irony thick enough to choke on. Hensley shoved him again, steering him down a dim hall to a row of cells. The air grew colder, damp with mildew, the clang of metal doors echoing off cinder-block walls. "In, you go," Hensley said, unlocking a cell and pushing Malik inside. The door slammed shut, the lock clicking with a finality that rattled the bars. Malik stood there, hands still cuffed behind him, staring through the grime-streaked bars as Hensley loomed on the other side. "Get comfy," the cop taunted, tapping his baton against his palm. "You're gonna rot here till I say otherwise." Malik didn't flinch, didn't blink. His eyes locked on Hensley's, steady and unyielding, a quiet storm brewing behind them. He'd faced worse: cartel hitmen, rogue informants, shootouts in abandoned warehouses. This was just another thug with a gun, only this one wore a badge. Hensley's smirk faltered, just for a second, unease flickering in his squint. "What's with you?" he snapped. "Too stupid to be scared?" Malik said nothing, letting the silence stretch, heavy and sharp. It gnawed at Hensley, that lack of fear, that refusal to grovel. The cop's knuckles whitened around the baton, itching to swing again, but he held back, something in Malik's stillness throwing him off. Hensley stepped closer, face inches from the bars, voice dropping low. "You think you're slick, huh? I've seen your kind 100 times, always the same. Mouth shut, eyes hard, like you're above it all. Well, you're not, you're nothing. Just another punk I'll bury." He rapped the baton against the metal, the clang bouncing down the hall, then turned on his heel, muttering under his breath as he stalked away. "Enjoy the night, tough guy. We'll talk tomorrow." Malik exhaled slow, easing onto the cell's concrete bench, the chill seeping through his suit. His mind churned. Hensley wasn't just a racist with a chip on his shoulder. He was sloppy, loud, too full of himself. That meant mistakes, openings. Malik catalogued every word, every move, the tattoo, the slurs, the way Hensley tossed that ID like it was trash. He'd use it all. But first he had to survive this, keep the op alive. Ghost's drop was blown, his cover teetering, and now he was stuck in a cage with a cop who'd sooner break his neck than listen. He leaned back, head against the wall, plotting his next step. The precinct hummed beyond the bars, phones ringing, voices overlapping. Malik tuned it out, focusing on Hensley's parting shot. Justice don't sleep. Neither did he. Years in the field had honed him. Stakeouts in freezing rain, decrypting burner calls, staring down barrels. This was a setback, not a defeat. He shifted, cuffs clinking, testing their give. Not much, but enough to work with if it came to that. His real badge, sewn into a slit in his jacket lining, pressed against his chest, a secret Hensley'd never guess. One move, one chance, and he'd flip this whole mess upside down. Footsteps echoed back down the hall, heavy and fast. Malik tensed, eyes narrowing as a shadow loomed. Not Hensley this time. Someone else. Someone with purpose. A woman's voice. Barked, "Where's the guy Hensley brought in?" The desk sergeant mumbled something, pointing. Malik straightened, senses sharp. Whoever this was, they were his ticket or his tombstone. He'd know soon enough. The shadow grew, boots clicking, closer, and Malik braced himself, ready for whatever came next. Malik Jackson leaned against the cold concrete wall of his cell, the damp chill seeping through his torn suit jacket as he sized up the figure slumped across from him. The cellmate was a scrawny guy, all jittery limbs and sunken eyes, his bony, fingers scratching at a patchy beard. He smelled like stale beer and desperation, a junkie caught in the precinct's revolving door. "Name's Terry," he rasped, voice cracking like dry twigs. "You new meat, huh? Hensley nabbed you good. That dude's a monster, man. Loves busting heads, especially ours." He tapped his chest, a weak grin showing yellowed teeth. "Black? Folks, I mean. Been at it forever. Brags he's got a tally." Malik's jaw tightened, eyes flicking to the bars as Terry rambled on. "Last month he cracked my skull for jaywalking. Said I looked shifty. You believe that? Shifty. Guy's got a nose for trouble, but only if your skin's dark enough." Terry's words hit like gravel, rough and unpolished, confirming what Malik already suspected. Hensley wasn't just a loose cannon. He was a predator with a pattern, a badge-wearing bully who'd built a career on broken bones and slurs. Malik filed it away, every detail a bullet for later. But what was Hensley's endgame? Was he just a bigot with a stick? Or did something dirtier lurk under that buzz cut? Terry twitched, glancing at the hall. Heard him on the phone once out back. Sounded like cash talk. "Yeah, I'll handle it," he said. "Usual cut. Sketchy, right?" Malik's ears perked. A payoff? That tracked with the op. Ghost's Ring thrived in this district, moving dope under cops' noses. Was Hensley on the take, guarding the streets for a price? Before Malik could press, a sharp clack of boots cut through the air. Voices rose, heated and fast, bouncing off the cinder block. "Hensley!" a woman bellowed, her tone slicing like a blade. "Where's your latest collar? I want answers now." Malik straightened, senses buzzing as a shadow swept into view. Captain Laura Briggs stormed down the corridor, a wiry figure with steel-grey streaks threading her tight bun. Her face was all angles, eyes burning with a fury that made the desk sergeant shrink when she passed. Hensley trailed her, his bulk lumbering behind, that smug smirk replaced by a scowl. "Captain, I told you he's a nobody. Caught him loitering, acting cagey outside the Rusty Anchor. Fits the dope profile," he said, voice tight, like he was reciting a script he'd worn thin. Briggs spun on him, finger jabbing his chest. "You've got no cause, Victor. No drugs, no weapon, just your damn gut again. Explain it." Hensley puffed up, crossing his arms. "My gut's kept this precinct ahead of the curve for 20 years. He's trouble, I know it." Briggs's glare could have melted steel. "Your gut's a liability. Booking's a mess because of you. Now where is he?" Hensley jerked his head toward Malik's cell, muttering, "Right there, wasting our time." Briggs strode to the bars, locking eyes with Malik. He saw her clock his suit, the blood on his shirt, the calm in his posture. What was she thinking? Another victim of Hensley's crusade or something more? She squinted, assessing, then barked, "You! Name!" Malik stood slow, cuffs clinking, as he stepped into the dim light. Time to flip the board. He reached into his jacket, fingers brushing the hidden seam where his real badge waited, stitched tight against the lining. Hensley snorted. What's he gonna pull, a sob story? But Malik's hand moved with purpose, sliding out a leather wallet. Flipping, it opened to reveal the gold shield. Federal Bureau of Investigation. "Special Agent Malik Jackson," he said, voice low and steady, cutting through the cell's stale air like a gunshot. "Serial number 7294. Call it in." The room froze. Terry's jaw dropped, a wheeze escaping his throat. Hensley's face drained to a sickly white, eyes bulging as he stared at the badge, then Malik, then back again. "Bullshit," he sputtered, lunging to snatch it, but Briggs slapped his hand away, grabbing the wallet herself. She studied it, lips thinning, then shot Hensley a look that could have shattered glass. "You locked up a Fed, Victor. A Fed. What the hell were you thinking?" Hensley stammered, sweat beading on his brow. "Captain, I didn't know. He looked—" His voice crumbled, excuses tangling into nonsense. Malik watched, silent, letting the weight sink in. Hensley's world was cracking, and he'd barely started swinging. Briggs pulled keys from her belt, unlocking the cell with a sharp twist. "Out!" she snapped, yanking the door wide. Malik stepped through, rolling his shoulders as she uncuffed him, the metal falling away with a dull clank. His wrists burned, raw from the bite, but he stood tall, gaze drilling into Hensley. The cop's hands twitched, itching for that baton, but Briggs stood between them, a wall of authority. "This is a mistake," Hensley growled, voice low, venomous. "He's playing us, probably a fake." Briggs rounded on him, voice dropping to a hiss. "You don't get to decide that. You've got no evidence, no probable cause, just your usual crap. Stand down now." Hensley's nostrils flared, but he backed off, fists clenched, eyes boring, into Malik with a hate that promised blood. Briggs turned to Malik, softer but firm. "Agent Jackson, my office, we need to talk." Malik nodded, brushing past Hensley, feeling the cop's glare like a knife in his back. He'd won this round, hadn't he? Exposed Hensley's bias, walked free. So why did the air feel heavier? As Briggs led him down the hall, Malik caught Hensley slipping away, ducking into a side room, phone already at his ear. His lips moved. Fast, too quiet to hear, but the glint in his eyes screamed trouble. What was he plotting? Who was he calling? Malik's gut twisted. Years in the field taught him a cornered dog bites hardest. Hensley wasn't done. He was doubling down. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Briggs pushed open her office door, gesturing him in, but Malik's mind was already racing. Freedom was a start, but Hensley's next move could bury him deeper than any cell. The junkie's words echoed, cash talk, usual cut. Hensley wasn't just a racist, he was dirty, tied to something big. Ghost? The op was still alive, teetering, on a razor's edge, and Malik had to keep it that way. He'd play this smart, use Briggs, stay one step ahead. But Hensley's rage was a wildfire, and Malik had just tossed fuel on it. What happens when a cop's pride turns lethal? Drop a number 1 in the comments if you think Hensley's too far gone to back off, or if you'd bet on Malik outsmarting him again. Smash that like button if you're rooting for justice to hit hard, and subscribe because the next twist will flip everything you think you know. So what's Hensley whispering into that phone? Who's on the other end? Ready? To turn Malik's big reveal into his biggest nightmare. Stick around because this powder keg's about to blow wide open. Malik Jackson followed Captain Laura Briggs into her cramped office, the door clicking shut behind him with a dull thud. The room smelled of burnt coffee and old paper, stacks of files teetering on a desk lit by a single buzzing lamp. Briggs sank into her chair, grey-streaked bun glinting in the glow, her sharp eyes pinning Malik as he stood, still rubbing his raw wrists. "Sit," she said, voice clipped but not hostile. He eased into a creaky seat, suit jacket torn at the shoulder, blood stains crusting the fabric. His ribs ached, a dull pulse from Hensley's baton, but he kept his face steady, masking the pain. "Talk, Agent Jackson. What's an FBI man doing in my precinct, cuffed up by one of my own?" Malik leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice low and measured. "I'm undercover, tracking a drug ring. Kingpin's called Ghost, operates out of the Rusty Anchor, among other spots. Been at it 6 months, feeding intel to my handler, Agent Torres. Tonight was a recon drop, nothing loud, till Hensley rolled up and clocked me for breathing black." Briggs's lips thinned, a flicker of disgust crossing her face, but she stayed silent, letting him roll. "He's dirty, Captain. My cellmate Terry heard him on a call talking payoffs. Usual cut, he said. Fits Ghost's MO, cops on the payroll to look the other way." Briggs tapped a pen against her desk, the rhythm sharp, her gaze drilling. Into him. "That's a hell of an accusation. You've got proof?" Malik shook his head, slow. "Not yet, just ears and instinct. But Hensley's got no business locking me up for sitting outside a bar. No drugs, no fight, just his word against mine." She exhaled, leaning back, chair squeaking under her weight. "Victor's a loose cannon, always has been. Gut calls over evidence. I'll keep this quiet, Agent. Your op's safe with me. But you've got to move fast. Hensley's not the type to let this slide." Malik nodded, gratitude flickering, but he kept it locked down. "Appreciate it. Shall need my gear back wallet, fake ID." Hensley tossed it in evidence. Briggs stood, grabbing her radio. "I'll handle it. Stay here." She stepped out, boots echoing down the hall, leaving Malik alone with the hum of the lamp and his racing thoughts. He'd bought time, hadn't he? Briggs was solid, a straight shooter, but Hensley's glare lingered in his mind, that promise of revenge etched in the cop's snarl. Malik's fingers brushed the hidden slit where his badge had been, now back in his pocket, a lifeline he'd barely played. The clock ticked, minutes stretching into an hour. Malik paced, 3 steps across, 3 back, the room's walls pressing, till his burner buzzed in his sock, a faint vibration he'd rigged for emergencies. He fished it out, flipping it open. Torres's voice crackled through, tight with panic. "Malik, what the hell's going on? Your face is all over Channel 5. Drug suspect nabbed outside West Side Bar. Photos you, in cuffs. Ghosts. Crew saw it, they're spooked, asking questions." Malik's gut sank, ice flooding his veins. "What? How? I just got out, Torres. Hensley's stunt. But I told Briggs to bury it." Torres cursed, loud and sharp. "Too late, it's viral. You're blown unless we spin this fast. Get to a safe house now. I'll dig into the leak." The line went dead, static hissing in Malik's ear. He shoved the phone back, mind spinning. Hensley. That bastard hadn't just slipped away to sulk. He'd lit a match. Malik bolted to Briggs' desk, flipping on her ancient TV. The screen flickered to life. A news anchor's, voice blaring. Suspect apprehended in ongoing drug probe, sources say. There he was, grainy but unmistakable. Hensley pinning him to the pavement, crowd cheering in the background. The door swung open, Briggs storming in, face pale. "Jackson, you see this?" She jabbed a finger at the screen. "Someone fed them. Your booking shot." "I didn't authorize that." Malik's eyes narrowed, voice hard. "Hensley did. Saw him on a phone right after you uncuffed me." Briggs slammed a fist on the desk, papers scattering. "Damn it! He's in the wind, not at his post. I'll haul him in, but you're a ghost till then. Gear's on its way." A knock interrupted. A rookie cop sliding in with a plastic bag. "Malik's wallet, fake ID, a few bucks." He grabbed it, checking the ID, Darius Wells still intact. Malik turned to Briggs, urgency coiling in his chest. "I've got to move. Ghost's crew will come for me. You'll hear from my handler, Torres. Keep Hensley off my back." She nodded, grim. "Go. I'll lock this down." He slipped out, ducking through a side exit into the night, Chicago's humid air hitting him like a slap. The precinct faded behind him, streetlights buzzing overhead as he cut toward his apartment, a third-floor walk-up 5 blocks east. He'd stash there, regroup, call Torres again. The op was teetering, but he'd salvaged worse. His phone buzzed again as he hit the stairwell, Torres's name flashing. "Malik, it's worse. Found coke in your car, parked near the bar. 2 ounces, bagged, tagged with your prints. Ties to that Darius ID. Cops are rolling. Warrants out." Malik froze, key half-turned in his lock. "Coke? That's impossible." "Hensley planted it, Torres. He's framing me." Torres' voice shook. "No time. They're calling you a dirty Fed. Get out now." Malik spun, peering through the grimy window. Red and blue lights flared 2 streets over, closing fast. He bolted down the stairs, heart hammering, mind racing. Hensley hadn't just leaked the photo. He'd built a noose. 2 ounces meant felony weight, enough to bury him, discredit the FBI, and let Ghost skate. Malik hit the alley, boots splashing through puddles, the wail of sirens growing louder. He'd cleared 1 hurdle, walked free from the cell only to slam into this. A manhunt with his name on it. How had Hensley pulled it off so fast? Who'd helped him plant the dope? The precinct's evidence lockup flashed in his head. Hensley tossing the ID, smirking. He'd had access, time, motive. Malik ducked behind a dumpster, catching his breath, as a cruiser screeched past, spotlight sweeping the shadows. His car, a beat-up Honda he'd parked 3 blocks from the bar, was now a crime scene. Hensley must have staked it out, waited for the arrest to stick, then slipped the drugs in. Prints. Easy enough with Malik's wallet in evidence, a quick smear on the bag. The cop's grin replayed in Malik's mind, that gloating found dirt jab back at booking. This wasn't random. It was calculated, a gut punch to turn Malik's win into ash. He slipped deeper into the alley, weaving through trash-strewn backstreets, the city's pulse a chaotic drumbeat around him. Squad cars multiplied, their radios crackling with his description. Male, black, 6'2", armed and dangerous. Armed? He hadn't carried tonight, not even a knife. Hensley was painting him as a rogue, a traitor, and the precinct was buying it. Briggs's promise to lock it down rang hollow now. Either she'd been outmaneuvered, or she was in on it. No, not her. She'd been too raw, too pissed at Hensley. This was his play. Solo or with backup, Malik hadn't sniffed out yet. A chain link. Fence loomed ahead, rusted and sagging. Malik scaled it, fabric ripping as he dropped to the other side, landing hard on cracked pavement. His apartment was a bust. Ghost's crew would hit it too if they hadn't already. He needed a new hole somewhere off-grid. Torres had safe houses, but the leak gnawed at him. Could he trust her? He pushed the doubt down, focusing on survival. Hensley's frame-up had flipped the board, turned freedom into a cage with no bars. Every cop in Chicago was hunting him now, and Ghost's killers wouldn't be far behind. The night swallowed him humid and thick as he vanished into the labyrinth of alleys, a ghost in his own city. Hensley thought he'd won, thought this would bury him. Malik's lips twitched, a grim flicker of defiance. Let him gloat. He'd dig out of this grave one way or another, and when he did, Hensley'd choke on that smirk. Malik Jackson sprinted through Chicago's alleys, boots pounding wet asphalt as sirens wailed behind him. a discordant chorus slicing the humid night. His breath burned, ribs screaming from Hensley's earlier blows, but he pushed harder, weaving, past overflowing dumpsters and rusted fire escapes. The city's underbelly swallowed him, shadows stretching long under flickering streetlights. But he knew it wouldn't hide him for long. Squad cars screeched at every corner, their lights, painting the brick walls red and blue, hunting him like a dog. He'd slipped the precinct, dodged the frame-up, but Hensley's net was tightening, each move a snare snapping at his heels. He ducked into a narrow passage, pressing against a graffiti-smeared wall, chest heaving as he fished the burner phone from his sock. The screen glowed, a lifeline in the dark. He punched Torres's number, her voice crackling through after 2 rings. "Malik, where are you? They're saying you planted that coke yourself, turned rogue. It's a shitstorm." Malik's grip tightened, knuckles paling. "Hensley's work, Torres. He's framing me to kill the op. Ghost's crew's on edge and I'm exposed. Tell me you've got something." Her pause stretched too long, static hissing. "Digging the leak. Hensley's dirty, Malik. Found payments, $5,000 a month. Wired from a shell company Ghost uses. He's their shield." Malik's jaw clenched, the puzzle clicking. Hensley wasn't just a racist thug. He was a cog in Ghost's machine, paid to bust heads and bury threats. That explained the baton, the cuffs, the planted dope. Hensley saw Malik as a loose thread, not a random mark. "Get me to a safe house," he said, voice low, urgent. "I'll lay low, figure the next play." Torres rattled off an address, a boarded-up spot in Englewood, 10 blocks south. "Move fast, I'll meet you there, bring backup." The line cut, leaving him with the echo of her words and a gnawing doubt he couldn't shake. He slipped the phone back, scanning the alley. A cruiser rolled past the mouth, slow and predatory, spotlight sweeping. Malik bolted the other way, cutting through a vacant lot, weeds snagging his torn pants. The safe house was a lifeline, a chance to regroup, but every step felt like a gamble. Hensley's reach was long, too long. How'd he leak that photo so fast? Plant the coke? Torres's intel was gold, but her voice had trembled, a crack he'd never heard before. Was she rattled or hiding something? He shoved the thought down, focusing on the run. The Englewood streets loomed ahead, a maze of crumbling row houses and flickering neon. Malik slipped into an alley off 63rd, spotting the safe house, a 2-story shell, windows dark, plywood peeling. He circled to the back, jimmying a loose board, and slid inside. Dust clogged the air, floors creaking under his weight as he scanned the gloom. A mattress sagged in the corner, a cracked sink dripped, but it was quiet, off the grid. He exhaled, sinking against the wall, pulling the burner to call Torres again. No signal. He tapped it, frowning. Jammed. Then a faint buzz cut the silence, high and mechanical. He peered through a slit in the boards, heart lurching. A drone hovered 50 feet up, its lens glinting, red light blinking as it swept the block. Malik ducked low, pulse racing. That wasn't precinct tech. It was private, sleek, Ghost's kind of toy. Seconds later, a TV crackled on in a nearby house, the volume spiking. Breaking news: fugitive ex-FBI agent Malik Jackson, wanted for drug trafficking and assault. Armed and dangerous. Last seen in Englewood. His face flashed, the same damn booking shot, now plastered Citywide. Hensley hadn't just framed him. He'd gone full scorched earth, bribing techs, rigging drones, turning Chicago into a kill zone. Malik's fists balled, adrenaline surging. He'd underestimated Hensley's pull, his venom. The cop wasn't licking wounds. He was orchestrating a hunt. Malik crept to the front, peering out. 2 figures emerged from the shadows across the street, bulky silhouettes in hoodies, hands tucked like they gripped steel. Rogue cops, Hensley's dog, sent to neutralize him. They split, one circling left, the other right, closing on the safe house. Malik's eyes darted, mapping exits. Back door, too exposed. Window, too loud. He grabbed a rusted pipe from the floor, hefting its weight, and waited. The first cop kicked the door in, wood splintering, flashlight slicing the dark. "Come out, Jackson," he barked, voice thick with menace. Malik swung, pipe cracking the guy's jaw with a wet crunch, sending him sprawling. The second charged, gun drawn, but Malik ducked, ramming his shoulder into the man's gut, slamming. him against the wall. A shot rang out, grazing the ceiling, plaster raining as Malik wrestled the pistol free and smashed the cop's nose with the butt. Both down, groaning, he snatched their radio, static crackling. "Targets at the safe house." "Take him out." Malik bolted upstairs, pipe and gun in hand, adrenaline drowning the pain in his ribs. He'd cleared the ambush, bought seconds, maybe minutes. The safe house was still his, a shaky sanctuary. He barricaded the door with a dresser, catching his breath, mind racing. Hensley's voice on that radio meant he was close, pulling strings, not letting this die. Malik checked the gun, 6 rounds left, and tucked it in his waistband. He'd survive this, turn it back on them. He crouched by the window, peering through a crack, waiting for Torres, praying she'd show. Then the air shifted, a low rumble growing outside. He squinted, spotting a glint in the sky, the drone circling tighter, its buzz a hornet's hum. Before he could move, an explosion tore through the back wall, fire and debris blasting inward, hurling him across the room. His ears rang, vision blurring, as flames licked the splintered boards, smoke choking the space. He crawled, coughing, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead, the safe house collapsing around him. Hensley's dogs hadn't just come to kill, they'd rigged the place to blow, a death trap with his name on it. Malik staggered to his feet, clutching the pipe, the gun lost in the rubble. The drone hovered outside, filming his ruin, feeding it live to Hensley's twisted game. He stumbled through a gaping hole where the wall had been, heat searing his back as the fire roared. The street spun, Inglewood's shadows warping. But he ran, legs pumping despite the dizziness. Hensley had escalated, turned a manhunt into a massacre. How many more traps waited? Who'd signed off on this? Malik's safe house was ash, his cover ash, and Hensley was laughing somewhere, counting the minutes till he'd finished the job. He vanished into the night, a ghost among the wreckage, every step a fight to stay alive. The drone's buzz faded, but the sirens didn't, closing in like hounds on a scent. Malik's mind burned with one truth. Hensley wasn't playing cop anymore. This was war, and he'd just lit the fuse. Drop a number 1 in the comments if you think Hensley's gone too far to stop now, or if you're betting Malik's got one last trick up his sleeve. Hit that like button if you're hooked on this fight for survival, and subscribe because the next blow will leave you reeling. So who's pulling Hensley's strings and what's waiting in the smoke for Malik? The answers are coming, and they're gonna hit harder than that blast. Malik Jackson clawed his way out of the safe house wreckage, smoke stinging his lungs as he stumbled onto Inglewood's cracked pavement, the roar of flames licking at his back. His suit hung in tatters, singed and blood-streaked, the gash on his forehead oozing a warm trickle down his cheek. The night pulsed with chaos, distant sirens wailing, the drone's buzz fading into the haze, and the acrid stench of burning wood choking the air. He coughed, spitting soot, his ribs a throbbing knot from Hensley's earlier beating, now joined by fresh bruises from the blast. The pipe he'd clutched slipped from his shaking hand, clattering to the ground, useless against the inferno he'd barely escaped. He staggered into an alley, legs wobbling but forcing him forward, every step a battle against the dizziness spinning his skull. The safe house was gone, torched by Hensley's goons, a brutal message that freedom was a lie. He'd fought off the rogue cops, thought he'd bought time. But this was a new level of savage, a bomb meant to erase him, not just silence, him. His burner phone buzzed in his sock, miraculously intact. He crouched behind a rusted trash bin, fishing it out, the screen cracked but glowing. Torres' name flashed. He answered, voice hoarse. Torres, safe house is ash. They blew it. Where's my backup? Her reply came fast, too fast, a nervous edge cutting through the static. Malik, thank God you're alive. I'm 10 minutes out, rerouting now. What happened? He squinted into the dark, replaying the drone, the explosion. Hensley's voice, on that radio. Hensley's off the rails, sent 2 cops, then rigged the place to blow. He's got tech cash, everything Ghost's got. You sure about those payments? Torres hesitated, a beat too long. Yeah, shell company's solid. He's their muscle. Stay put. I'll find you. The line clicked off, her tone lingering. In his ears, shaky, off-key, Malik's gut twisted, a cold prickle climbing his spine. Torres had been his rock for years. Stakeouts in Detroit, busts in St. Louis, always steady. That waiver wasn't fear, it was something else. He shoved the phone back, scanning the alley. The fire's glow lit the sky behind him, drawing eyes, cops, maybe worse. He couldn't stay here, couldn't trust stay put. Not with Hensley's. Reach growing, turning safehouses into graves. He needed answers, needed to know how deep this rot ran. Torres knew his location. Had she sold it? He pushed off the bin, limping toward a boarded-up warehouse 2 blocks east, a spot he'd scouted months back for the op. The warehouse loomed, a hulking skeleton of steel and broken glass, its shadows swallowing him as he slipped through a shattered window. Dust coated the floor, machinery rusted in corners, but it was quiet, a temporary shield. He sank against a pillar, catching his breath, and pulled a second burner from his shoe, a backup even Torres didn't know about. He dialed a shadow number, an old contact from his Detroit days, a PI named Reese who owed him. "Reese, it's Malik. Need a tail on someone, fast. Agent Elena Torres, FBI Chicago. Where's she at right now?" Reese's gravelly voice crackled. Back. "Gimme 20 minutes, you in deep?" Malik grunted. "Deeper than I thought." 18 minutes later, Reese texted coordinates, a parking lot off Halstead, 10 miles north. Malik frowned, cross-checking. Torres had said she was south, rerouting. Halstead was nowhere near Englewood. He grabbed a cab from a gas station, a rattling junker driven by a guy who didn't ask questions, and paid cash to roll up a block from the lot. He crept closer, sticking to the dark, and spotted her. Torres, pacing near a black SUV, her short hair catching the streetlight. She wasn't alone. A lean figure in a leather jacket leaned against the hood, Ghost's lieutenant, Rico. All sharp cheekbones and colder eyes, a man Malik had tracked for months. His stomach dropped, ice flooding his veins. Torres wasn't rushing to him. She was meeting the enemy. He edged closer, ducking behind a stack of crates, ears straining. Rico's voice cut through, low and smug. "Your boy's a problem, Elena. That photo's got Ghost twitchy. You said he'd stay quiet." Torres paced, hands in her pockets, voice tight. "Hensley jumped the gun. I didn't greenlight the leak. Malik's still in play, but we can spin it. Pin the bomb on him, call it terrorism. Ghost's clean, you're clean." Rico smirked, tossing her a thick envelope. "Better be. Next payment's double if he's not dead by dawn." Malik's breath caught, betrayal sinking claws into his chest. Torres, his handler, his lifeline, was Ghost's mole, feeding Hensley intel, cashing out on his blood. He pulled the burner, hitting record, capturing every damning word. Hensley's. Boots crunched gravel then, the cop striding in, buzz cut glinting, a grin splitting his face. "Told you I'd handle it," he said, clapping Rico's shoulder. "Safe house is toast. Jackson's running scared. We'll bury him with this." He waved a phone, screen glowing with drone footage. Malik crawling from the rubble, live proof of his guilt. Torres nodded, tense. "Good. Frame holds if we move fast." Malik's grip tightened, the tiny mic catching Hensley's gloat. "Terrorism rap's perfect. Feds'll disown him, Ghost walks, and I get a medal." Rico laughed, sharp and cruel, while Torres pocketed the cash, her face unreadable but complicit. Malik stopped the recording, 30 seconds of dynamite, enough to torch them all. He'd trusted her, bled for her ops, and she'd sold him to the wolves. He slipped back, heart pounding, and sent the file to Briggs via a secure drop, texting, "Hensley's with Ghost, Torres too, check this." Briggs was his last card, straight, pissed, maybe clean. She'd blow this open, wouldn't she? He retreated to the warehouse, replaying the sting. He'd nailed them, caught their voices, their plan. Victory pulsed in his chest, a flicker of hope. He'd expose Hensley, end Ghost's reign, clear his name. Then his stolen radio crackled, static slicing the quiet, and Briggs' voice boomed through, crisp and cold. "All units. Full lockdown. Suspect Malik Jackson, armed, dangerous, linked to Englewood bombing. Shoot on sight." Malik froze. The words a sledgehammer. Briggs hadn't bought it. She'd turned. Or had Hensley gotten to her first? The radio hissed again. "Citywide alert. Effective now. Contain the traitor." Malik's hope shattered, glass underfoot. He'd sent proof, thought he'd flipped the script. But Briggs was calling him the enemy. Hensley's grin flashed in his mind, that gloating certainty. The cop had outplayed him, twisted Briggs, locked the city down. Malik tossed the radio, smashing it against the pillar, shards skittering across the floor. Torres' betrayal was a gut punch, but Briggs? That cut deeper, a double cross he hadn't seen coming. He was alone now, truly alone. With every badge in Chicago gunning for him and Ghost's crew circling the edges, he checked the warehouse, finding a loose board near the back, and pried it free, slipping into the night. The lockdown meant checkpoints, drones, SWAT, Hensley's war machine in full swing. Malik's recording was useless if Briggs was dirty too, another pawn or a mastermind he'd misread. He limped through the shadows, blood crusting his brow, the city a cage closing in. Hensley wasn't just winning. He was rewriting the game, painting Malik as the villain while Ghost laughed from the sidelines. How had it flipped so fast? Who else was in Hensley's pocket? Malik's mind raced, plotting his next move. He'd survived the blast, dodged the cops, caught the truth on tape. He wasn't done, not yet. Hensley thought he'd cornered him. But Malik had lived in corners before. Detroit alleys, cartel traps, nights with no dawn. He'd find a way, turn this back, make them choke on their own lies. The city loomed, a beast ready to swallow him. But he kept moving, a ghost with a grudge, waiting for the crack to strike through. Malik Jackson crouched in the gutted shell of a condemned tenement, the air thick with mold, and the faint hum of Chicago's lockdown sealing him in. His breath rasped, shallow and sharp, the gash on his forehead crusting over as he pressed against a peeling wall, peering through a jagged hole where a window once hung. The city outside was a beast unleashed, sirens howling in every direction, helicopter blades thumping overhead, and Briggs' voice still echoing in his skull, "Shoot on sight, traitor." Torres' betrayal had gutted him, Briggs' turn had buried. Him and Hensley? Hensley was the puppet master, pulling strings to turn Chicago into his personal killing field. He'd made it 3 blocks from the warehouse, dodging checkpoints by cutting through backyards and storm drains, his torn suit now a muddy rag clinging to his bruised frame. The tenement was a last-ditch hideout, its sagging floors and broken stairs a maze he could use. He needed a breather, a plan, something to claw back from the edge. His burner buzzed, no signal, jammed by the lockdown's tech sweep. Hensley's reach was suffocating, a noose tightening with every move Malik made. Then a roar swelled outside. Raw and guttural, not cops but something worse. He edged to the gap, squinting into the street. A mob coalesced under the flickering streetlights, 30 strong, maybe more. Their faces twisted with rage and cheap beer. Pipes glinted in their hands, baseball bats, a few pistols catching the light. They wore hoodies, trucker hats, one guy sporting a swastika tattoo snaking up his neck. "There!" a voice bellowed, pointing at the tenement, and the crowd surged, a wave of hate crashing toward him. Malik's stomach lurched as a TV blared from a nearby stoop, Hensley's smug mug filling the screen. FBI traitor Malik Jackson bombed a power. Safe house tonight. He's a terrorist, armed, dangerous. Citizens, protect your city. The words ignited them, slurs erupting like gunfire, filthy, criminal, animal, each one a dagger aimed at Malik's chest. Hensley hadn't just framed him. He'd weaponized the city's underbelly, sicked a lynch mob on him with lies dripping from his lips. Malik ducked back, heart slamming against his ribs. How'd Hensley rally them so fast? Who'd armed them? He scanned the room, spotting a rusted window frame on the far wall, its glass long gone. He bolted for it, sliding through just as the front door splintered under a barrage of kicks and crowbars. Glass crunched under his boots as he landed in a weed-choked yard, the mob's shouts shaking the night. "Burn him out!" someone yelled, and a bottle sailed through the air, shattering against the tenement's wall. Flames erupted, a Molotov cocktail's roar swallowing the cheers as fire clawed up the rotting wood, licking at Malik's heels. He sprinted, ducking under a clothesline, the heat searing his back as he vaulted a low fence into another yard. Bullets snapped past, wild shots from the mob's guns, one grazing his calf, a hot sting he ignored. He wove through sheds and trash. Heaps their chance? Kill him, string him up, fueling his legs. He hit a dead-end alley, brick walls boxing him in, the mob's shadows stretching closer, torches flickering like hellhounds. Malik spun, spotting a drainpipe bolted to the wall. He climbed, hands slipping on rust, hauling himself onto a flat roof as the crowd flooded below, pipes banging against the brick in a frenzied rhythm. He flattened himself, catching his breath, the fire's glow painting the skyline orange. He escaped barely, but they were everywhere. Hensley's dogs off the leash. He needed to hit back, expose this madness. His eyes landed on a payphone across the street, a relic dangling by its cord. Malik waited, timing their chaos, then slid down a gutter, landing soft and darting to the booth. The mob raged a block away, distracted by the blaze. He punched in a number, a journalist he'd met on a past case, Lena Hart, a bulldog with a mic who'd owe him one. She picked up, voice sharp. "Who's this?" Malik kept it tight. "Malik Jackson, FBI. Hensley's framing me. Terrorism, drugs, all lies. I've got proof, a recording. Him, Ghost's crew, a dirty fed. Air it." He uploaded the file. From his burner, 30 seconds of Hensley's gloat, Torres's deal, Rico's cash. Lena whistled low. "This is dynamite. Give me an hour, it's live." Malik hung up, slipping back into the shadows, hope flickering. He'd turned the tables, hadn't he? The truth would gut Hensley, rally the city against him. He ducked into a storm drain, crouching in the damp, waiting for the broadcast to hit. An hour crawled by, the mob's noise fading as copters buzzed overhead, searching. Then a loudspeaker crackled. Hensley's voice booming across Englewood, cold and triumphant. "Malik Jackson's still out there, a killer on the loose. $5,000 to the man who brings me his head, dead or alive. Cash on delivery." Malik's blood ran cold. The flicker snuffed out. $5,000. Hensley wasn't backing off. He was doubling down, buying the city's soul with Ghost's money. The mob roared back to life, footsteps pounding closer, a fresh wave armed with chains and Molotovs. Malik bolted from the drain, splashing through ankle-deep muck, the bounty a death knell ringing in his ears. He'd aired the truth, thought it'd save him, but Hensley twisted it, painted him as a hunted dog. The journalist's scoop was live. Lena's voice crackled from a distant radio. "Corrupt cop exposed." But the mob didn't care. Their hate-a-blind, bellowing beast. He darted into a vacant lot, chest heaving, the city a trap snapping shut. Hensley's lies had teeth now, cash fueling the fire, every thug with a grudge joining the hunt. Malik's calf bled. His ribs screamed, but he kept moving. Weaving through abandoned cars, their rusted hulks his only cover. The mob's torches bobbed a block back, closing fast, their slurs a war cry. He'd survived the tenement, turned, the recording into a weapon. But Hensley's counterstrike was a guillotine, swift and merciless. How many would die chasing that bounty? Who'd cash it in? Malik's mind raced, plotting through the haze. He'd exposed Hensley, lit a spark, but the cop fanned it into a wildfire. He needed leverage, a way to flip this chaos back. Ghosts. Crew lurked out there too, silent but watching, ready to pounce if the mob failed. Malik was a ghost in his own story now, hunted by all sides, his every win a step deeper into the pit. He slipped into a back street, shadows his only ally, defiance burning low but alive. Hensley wanted a war? He'd get one. Drop a number 1 in the comments if you think Hensley's bounty proves he's lost all control, or if you reckon Malik's broadcast will still turn the tide. Smash that like button if you're gripped by this spiral of hate and survival, and subscribe because the next clash is going to shake the foundations of this twisted game. So, can Malik outrun a city-turned executioner? Or is Hensley's next move the one that finally breaks him? The clock's ticking and the streets are about to bleed. Malik Jackson slipped through Chicago's back streets, the night a suffocating shroud as he dodged the mob's torches and the relentless thump of police choppers slicing the sky. His calf throbbed where a bullet had grazed it, blood soaking. His pant leg and his ribs ached with every shallow breath, a lingering gift from Hensley's baton and the safehouse blast. The city was a furnace of hate, Hensley's $5,000 bounty turning every shadow into a hunter, their slurs echoing like war drums. Lena's broadcast had aired. Hensley's voice, Torres deal, Rico's cash, sparking protests downtown, chants of justice now, clashing with the mob's roars. But it wasn't enough. Hensley had twisted it, kept the noose tight, and Malik was still the prey. He needed a knockout blow, something to end this, clear his name, bury Hensley and Ghost together. His mind locked on Rico's words from the recording. Ghost's crew, spooked by the leak, would regroup, tighten their grip. Malik knew their playbook: warehouses, drop points, the arteries of their dope empire. He'd tracked one spot months back, a squat concrete bunker off Cicero Avenue, a hub for cutting and shipping. If he could nab Ghost there, force a confession, he'd flip this nightmare. But he couldn't do it alone, not with the city gunning for him. He ducked into a phone booth, its glass cracked, the cord dangling like a lifeline. His burner was low, but he punched a number from memory. Rico Vasquez, not Ghost's lieutenant, but an old informant from his Detroit days, a wiry ex-con with a knack for slipping through cracks. The line buzzed, then clicked. "Who's this?" Rico's voice rasped, cautious. "Malik Jackson. Need you in Chicago now. Cicero warehouse, Ghost spot. We're taking him down." Rico sucked his teeth, a long pause. "You're hot, man. $5,000 on your head." "Why me?" Malik kept it tight. "You owe me." "Detroit 21, I got you out. Bring cuffs a cam, tonight." Rico grumbled, but agreed, a reluctant, "Fine, 2 hours." Malik hung up, slipping back into the dark, weaving through alleys. Towards Cicero. The streets buzzed with tension, cop cars prowling, mob stragglers waving pipes. But he stuck to the edges, a ghost in the chaos. 2 hours later, Rico met him behind a rusted dumpster, a skinny figure in a faded jacket, grey eyes, darting. He handed Malik a duffel, handcuffs, a handheld camera, a switchblade. "This is nuts," Rico muttered, but followed as Malik led him to the warehouse, its hulking silhouette looming under a sodium glow. They crept to a side door, Malik picking the lock with the blade, the click loud in the stillness. Inside, the air stank of chemicals, tables piled with white bricks, scales glinting in the dim light. Ghost's crew milled, 6 men, armed, jittery. Then he saw him, Ghost, a wiry man with shark eyes and a silver chain, barking orders near. A stack of crates. Malik nodded to Rico, whispering, "Film it, every move." Rico flipped the camera on, red light blinking, as Malik circled wide, sticking to the shadows, closing on Ghost like a panther. He struck fast, lunging from behind, slamming Ghost's arm against a crate, twisting it till the man yelped, dropping a pistol that skittered across the floor. Malik cuffed him, one wrist then the other, the steel snapping shut as Ghost thrashed spitting curses. "You're dead, Fed," he snarled, but Malik shoved him down, knee on his back, voice low. "Talk. Hensley, Torres, the payoffs, now." Rico zoomed in, capturing Ghost's sneer as he growled, "Hensley's my dog. $5,000 a month keeps the heat off. Torres feeds him your moves. You're screwed." Malik's chest surged, victory pulsing. He'd nailed Ghost, got the confession on tape, a dagger to plunge into Hensley's gut. The crew froze, guns half raised, unsure, Rico's camera pinning them in place. Malik hauled Ghost up, grinning, grim despite the blood crusting his brow. "We're done here," he said, shoving Ghost toward the door, Rico trailing, footage rolling. He'd clear his name, end this war, walk free. The protests would roar louder, the feds would swarm, Hensley'd... Rot, he'd won, hadn't he? Then the warehouse doors exploded inward, metal buckling as SWAT stormed through, rifles up, flashlights blinding. "Drop it," a voice boomed, and Malik spun, Ghost still cuffed in his grip. Hensley strode in behind them, buzz cut, glinting, a savage grin splitting his face, badge gleaming like a trophy. "Gotcha, Jackson," he crowed, waving off the team. "Knew you'd bite." Malik's stomach dropped, ice flooding his veins. Rico backed up, camera shaking, but a shot rang out, sharp and final. Hensley's gun smoked, and Rico crumpled, blood pooling from his chest, the camera clattering dead beside him. Malik froze, Ghost twisting in his grip, laughing low. "Nice try, Fed." Hensley stepped closer, holstering his piece, nodding to a SWAT grunt who tossed a pistol at Malik's feet, barrel still warm. "He resisted," Hensley said, loud for the team, planting the lie as SWAT circled. "Shot my CI, tried to run. Cuff him." Malik released Ghost, hands rising slow, mind reeling. The cuffs clicked back on, tighter this time, biting into the welts from hours ago. Hensley had flipped it, turned his sting into a slaughter. Rico's blood a fresh stain on his hands. Ghost smirked, brushing off his jacket as a SWAT guy uncuffed him, Hensley's nod setting him free. "Good work, Victor," Ghost muttered, slipping out, untouchable again. Malik's eyes locked on Hensley, rage boiling under the calm, but the cop just laughed, gripping his arm, dragging him toward a van. "You're done, Jackson. Murder, terrorism, the works, nobody'll buy your tape now." Malik stumbled, the SWAT lights blurring, Rico's body a heap in his peripheral. He'd had Ghost, had the proof, but Hensley'd been waiting, tipped, off, ready to bury him deeper. The van doors slammed, engine rumbling as they rolled back to the precinct, Hensley's grin a constant taunt through the partition. Malik sat, wrists bleeding, the sting's triumph ash in his mouth. He'd walked into a trap, thought he'd outsmarted them, but Hensley played dirtier, killed Rico, freed Ghost, and pinned it all on him. The protests outside faded, drowned by sirens, the city's pulse a death march. He'd captured the kingpin, held victory for a fleeting second, only to watch Hensley snatch it, twist it, and aim it at his throat. Malik's mind churned, replaying Rico's last gasp, Hensley's smug shot. How'd he know? Who'd ratted? The warehouse. Torres's voice flickered in his head, her shaky lies, but this felt bigger, a web he couldn't map. The precinct loomed ahead, its brick walls a gallows waiting to claim him. He'd lost the tape, lost Rico, lost the edge, but his pulse still thrummed, defiance a low ember. Hensley thought he'd broken him, thought this was checkmate. Malik's lips twitched, a ghost of a plan forming. Let him gloat. This wasn't over, not while he breathed. Malik Jackson sat in the defendant's chair, wrists chafed raw from cuffs that had become his second skin, the courtroom air thick with the musk of polished wood and stale tension. His torn suit was gone, replaced by a stiff orange jumpsuit. That hung loose on his battered frame, the bloodstains swapped for bruises blooming purple across his ribs and jaw. The past 48 hours had blurred, Hensley's SWAT ambush, Rico's blood pooling on the warehouse floor, Ghost's smirk, as he walked free. Now Malik faced a judge's gavel, charged with murder and terrorism. Hensley's lies a noose tightening around his neck. The courtroom buzzed, a packed gallery of reporters, protesters, and gawkers craning for a glimpse of the rogue Fed. The jury sat rigid, 12 faces all white, their eyes cold and unyielding, lips pressed into thin lines of prejudgment. Judge Harold Grayson presided, a barrel-chested man with a silver comb-over and a smirk that mirrored Hensley's, his black robe a cloak of bias. Malik's lawyer, a wiry public defender named Ellis Tate, shuffled papers beside him, sweat beading on his brow. "We've got the recording," Ellis whispered, voice shaky but determined. "It's our shot." Malik nodded, silent, his gaze locked on Hensley across the room. The cop stood at the witness stand, buzz cut gleaming under fluorescent lights, his uniform pressed crisp, badge a taunting shine. He leaned into the mic, voice booming with rehearsed certainty. "Malik Jackson's a traitor. Caught him red-handed, holding Ghost hostage in that warehouse. My CI, Rico Vasquez, tried to intervene. Jackson shot him cold, resisted arrest. I saw it all." The jury shifted, nods rippling through them, their stares hardening. Hensley spun the tale, smooth and venomous, painting Malik as a wild dog, drugs in his car, a bomb in Englewood, now murder. Each lie landed like a brick, building, a wall no truth could pierce. Malik's chest burned, rage simmering beneath his calm. Hensley's grin flickered as he stepped down, smugness a mask over the hate Malik knew drove him. How'd he sleep weaving this web? Who'd greased the judge's palm? The prosecution rested, a slick ADA with a practiced sneer wrapping up. "The evidence is clear. Jackson's a menace, a disgrace to the badge he once wore." Ellis stood, adjusting his tie, voice cracking as he called Malik to testify. "Tell them," he urged, and Malik rose, slow and steady, the room hushing as he took the stand. He faced the jury, voice low but steel-edged. "I'm Special Agent Malik Jackson, FBI. Hensley arrested me for sitting outside a bar, no cause, just his bias. Planted coke in my car, blew up a safe house, framed me for it all. That recording? It's him, Ghost's crew, my handler, plotting to bury me. Whispers rippled through the gallery, the jury's eyes narrowing, but Grayson banged, his gavel silencing them. "Stick to the facts," he snapped, a warning glare aimed at Malik. Ellis played the tape, 30 seconds of Hensley's gloat, terrorism raps perfect, and Torres's deal filling the room, raw and undeniable. The gallery gasped, reporters scribbling, the jury shifting uncomfortably. Hensley's face twitched, a crack in his mask, but Grayson smirked, unfazed, like he'd expected it. The ADA objected, "Hearsay," but Ellis countered, "It's direct evidence, Your Honor." Grayson overruled grudgingly, his eyes flicking to Hensley with a flicker of something, complicity. The jury deliberated, 2 hours stretching like years, Malik's pulse a steady drum in his ears. They'd see the truth, wouldn't they? Free him, nail Hensley. He'd walked this far, survived the mob, the blast, the sting gone wrong. The foreman stood, voice flat. Not guilty on all counts. Relief crashed through Malik, a breath he hadn't known he held escaping as Ellis clapped his shoulder, grinning. The gallery erupted, cheers clashing with jeers, Grayson's gavel useless against the tide. Malik stood, jumpsuit swapped for street clothes, a grey hoodie, jeans handed over by a bailiff. He'd won, cleared his name, exposed Hensley's rot. The cop sat rigid, fists clenched, his glare a promise of blood as Malik stepped toward the exit, freedom a tangible weight. Lifting, he pushed through the courthouse doors, late afternoon sun slanting across the steps. The city's hum a welcome roar after the cell's silence. Protesters chanted nearby, "No justice, no peace," holding signs with his face, a hero's portrait. He'd done it, flipped the script, walked out a free man. Then a crack split the air, a sniper's bullet grazing his shoulder, fire searing through muscle. He stumbled, blood blooming on the hoodie, spinning to see Hensley across the street. Not in uniform, but a black jacket, rallying a dozen figures in hoods, white masks, red crosses, a hate group primed to strike. The mob charged, boots thundering, chains rattling, a guttural "Get him!" shaking the steps. Malik bolted, shoulder screaming, but they were fast, too fast, cutting him off as he hit the sidewalk. A pipe slammed his knee, buckling him, another cracking his ribs, the old bruises, flaring anew. Hands gripped his arms, dragging him toward a van, its side door gaping like a maw. Hensley loomed, grinning savage, voice a hiss over the chaos. "Law let you slip, Jackson, but I won't. We'll finish this my way." The hoods shoved Malik inside, doors slamming, tires squealing as they peeled out, the courthouse shrinking. In the rear view, Malik slumped against the van's wall, blood dripping, pain a white-hot pulse through his body. He'd won the trial, thought he'd broken Hensley's grip, but this was the counter-strike, extra-legal, feral, a lynch mob with their badge's blessing. Hensley sat up front, barking orders, his hate group a pack of wolves he'd unleashed. The acquittal was a mirage, freedom a trap snapped shut. How'd Hensley rally them so quick? Who'd tipped the sniper? Malik's mind raced, plotting through the haze, defiance a faint ember in the dark. He'd survived the courtroom, but this was a new hell. And Hensley held the reins. Drop a number 1 in the comments if you think Hensley's gone full rogue with this mob, or if you'd wager Malik's still got a play to outfox him. Hit that like button if you're reeling from this courtroom to chaos twist, and subscribe because the next chapter's going to test every ounce of Malik's grit. So, what's Hensley got planned in that van, and can Malik claw his way out of this rolling death trap? The fight's far from over and the stakes just hit the roof. Malik Jackson jolted awake, head throbbing as if a sledgehammer had cracked his skull, the world a blur of pain and shadow, his wrists burned, zip ties cutting into the raw welts left by days of cuffs, binding him to a metal chair bolted to a concrete floor. Blood crusted his lips, his shoulder a pulsing fire where the sniper's bullet had grazed him, the hoodie soaked red and clinging to his battered frame. The air stank of rust and sweat, a cavernous warehouse swallowing sound, its high ceiling lost in gloom. Chains dangled from rafters, a single bulb swaying overhead, casting jagged light across his swollen face. He blinked, vision clearing, and saw them. A dozen hooded figures in a loose circle, white masks with red crosses glaring like silent judges, their breath a collective rasp. Pipes and bats hung at their sides, knuckles white with anticipation. Then Hensley stepped into the light, buzzcut glinting, a cattle prod in his meaty hand, its tip sparking blue. His grin was a slash of teeth, eyes wild with a hate that went beyond reason. "Thought you'd walk, huh, Jackson?" he sneered, voice echoing off the walls. "Court let you off, but I don't. You're mine now, fed or not." Malik's chest heaved, ribs screaming from the mob's blows, but he forced his gaze steady, locking on Hensley. The cop circled, prod humming, the hood shifting closer, a pack scenting blood. "You're a disease," Hensley spat, jabbing the air an inch from Malik's chest. "Think you're above us, with your badge, your smarts. I'll break you. Make you sing for the camera." He nodded to a tripod in the corner, a red light blinking, filming every twitch. "Confess, FBI corruption, drugs, Rico's murder. Give me the lie and maybe you breathe tomorrow." Malik's jaw tightened, defiance a low burn beneath the pain. He'd survived the trial, thought he'd won, only to land here, Hensley's private hell, a racist's dungeon where law meant nothing. The prod sparked again and Hensley lunged, jamming it into Malik's side. Electricity ripped through him. A white-hot scream he bit back, muscles seizing as he thrashed against the ties. The hoods cheered, a guttural roar, "Teach him!" ringing in his ears. Hensley pulled back, laughing, sweat beading on his brow. "That's one, got plenty more. Talk or we crank it up." Malik gasped, spit and blood dripping to the floor, his body a live wire of agony. He wouldn't break, wouldn't give Hensley the satisfaction. His eyes darted, scanning the chair, metal rusted, a nail protruding from the armrest, loose and jagged. He shifted, subtle, fingers brushing it, working it free as Hensley ranted, "You're nothing, Jackson. Just another thug I'll bury. City's mine, ghost's mine, and you're the dirt under my boot." The prod zapped again, this time his thigh, a jolt that bucked him forward, the chair creaking but holding. He gritted his teeth, the nails slipping into his palm, a lifeline in the storm. Hensley circled, oblivious, drunk on power, the hoods chanting. "More, more!" Malik soared, slow and silent, the plastic ties fraying as the prod hit his chest, a third blast that blurred his vision, his heart stuttering. He spat blood, voice rasping. "You're done, Hensley, tapes out, world knows." Hensley froze, then laughed, a barking sound that bounced off the walls. "World don't care. You're a dead man walking. Confess now." He raised the prod, aiming for Malik's throat, but the ties snapped, plastic pinging to the floor. Malik surged, slamming his fist into Hensley's jaw, a crack echoing as the cop staggered, prod clattering. The hoods lunged, pipes swinging, but Malik ducked, grabbing the chair and hurling it into the nearest thug, toppling him with a grunt. He bolted, shoulder slamming another aside, weaving through the chaos toward a side door, its rusted hinges. His only shot. A bat grazed his back, pain flaring, but he hit the door, bursting into the night, cold air slapping his face as he sprinted across a gravel lot, warehouses looming like silent giants. He'd escaped, broken free, thought he'd bought a chance. His lungs burned, legs pumping despite the limp blood trailing from his calf. The mob's shouts faded, replaced by a distant whir growing louder. A helicopter, its spotlight slicing the dark, pinning him like a moth. Hensley's voice boomed through a megaphone, warped but clear. "He's loose! Kill him!" Malik dove, behind a stack of crates, heart hammering as the chopper banked, rotor wash kicking dust into his eyes. Bullets chewed the pavement, a strafing run tearing chunks from the ground inches from his boots. He rolled, scrambling into a drainage ditch, mud soaking his wounds as the light swept past, then doubled back. Hensley wasn't letting go, wasn't slowing down. This was his endgame, a kill order from the sky. Malik's escape had flipped the script, but the cop countered with raw firepower, turning the night into a war zone. He crawled, ditch water stinging his cuts, the chopper circling like a vulture. He'd slipped the torture, defied the odds, only to face this. A hunter's blade honed by hate, sharper than any courtroom lie. Malik's mind raced, plotting through the haze. He'd lost the gun in the safe house blast, lost Rico's camera, lost everything but the will to keep moving. Hensley thought he'd cornered him, Thought the chopper would finish it. Malik's lips twitched, a grim flicker of resolve. He'd survived worse. Cartel ambushes, double crosses in the field. This was just another fight, another wall to climb. He edged along the ditch, shadows his shield, the spotlight's glare a breath away. Hensley wanted him dead. He'd have to work for it. Malik Jackson stumbled through Chicago's pre-dawn gloom, the helicopter's roar fading into a distant thrum as he veered off the drainage ditch, mud caking his torn hoodie and jeans. Blood seeped from his shoulder, the sniper's graze a fiery "Tach!" and his calf throbbed where the mob's bullet had nicked him, each step a jolt of pain through his battered frame. His ribs groaned, bruised from Hensley's baton and the hood's pipes, his breath a ragged wheeze as he pushed deeper, into Inglewood's maze of sagging row houses and flickering neon. The city was a hunter's trap, Hensley's spotlight sweeping the night, but Malik kept moving, a ghost fueled by grit. He rounded a corner, spotting a faded sign swinging in the breeze. Clara's Cuts. A barbershop tucked between a pawn shop and a shuttered deli, its windows dark, blinds drawn tight. The door hung ajar, a sliver of shadow beckoning. Malik slipped inside, the bell jingling soft as he eased it shut, locking it behind him. The air smelled of pomade and dust, chairs lining a mirrored wall, a single bulb flickering over a cracked counter. He slumped against it, blood dripping onto the linoleum, his vision swimming as he fought to stay upright. He'd escaped the chopper, dodged the bullets, but he was running on fumes. Hensley's war machine closing in. Footsteps creaked. From the back, slow and deliberate, and Malik tensed, hand curling into a fist. A figure emerged, a grey-haired black woman in a quilted robe, her face etched with lines of steel and sorrow, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. She held a snub-nosed revolver, steady, aimed at his chest. "Who are you?" "Bleeding all over." "My floor," she snapped, voice gravelly but calm. Malik raised his hands slow, voice hoarse. "Malik Jackson, FBI. Hensley's hunting me. Need a place to crash, just for a minute." Her gaze flicked to his wounds, then the locked door assessing, unyielding. She lowered the gun, not all the way, but enough. "Miss Clara," she said, stepping closer, peering at his face. "Saw you on the news, traitor-fed. Hensley's filth's been all over this city for years. Racist dog with a badge, you real?" Malik nodded, pulling his badge from the hoodie's slit, the gold glinting faint. "Undercover till he framed me. Ghost's crew, dirty cops, the works." Clara's lips thinned, a spark of fury lighting her eyes. "Bastard's torched half my block with his patrols. I'm ex-CIA, retired 10 years. Hensley's kind's why I quit. Sit." Malik sank into a barber chair, wincing as she grabbed a first aid kit from under the counter, her hands deft. As she cleaned his shoulder, stitching the graze with a needle and thread. "Hold still," she muttered, dabbing antiseptic on his calf, wrapping it tight. "Heard the choppers, saw the fire, you're a damn mess." Malik grunted, pain flaring but easing under her care. "He's got a hate group, blew a safe house, framed me for murder. I've got proof, lost it, need to hit back." Clara smirked, faint but fierce. "Then we hit him." She led him downstairs, a basement rigged with old tech. A clunky monitor, cables snaking to a keyboard, a relic of her CIA days. "Still got tricks," she said, booting it up, fingers flying as she hacked into precinct cams. Grainy feeds flickered. Hensley, at a desk, barking into a phone, then slipping out, meeting Ghost in an alley, their handshake quick cash-swapping hands. Malik's pulse surged, the ember flaring. "That's it," he said, leaning in. "Him and Ghost live. We broadcast this, he's done." Clara nodded, pulling a USB, recording the feed. "Got a friend at Channel 9. We'll air it. Blow his world apart." They worked fast, Clara splicing the footage, Malik narrating. "Saw it tonight. Officer Victor Hensley, colluding with drug lord Ghost, framing me, killing innocents." The file uploaded, sent to her contact, a producer who'd run it raw. Minutes later, the basement TV flared. Breaking news, the feed live. Hensley's A. Smug face shaking hands with Ghost. The city's underbelly exposed. Protests roared louder outside. Car horns blaring, crowds chanting Malik's name. "Free Jackson!" He exhaled, a grim smile tugging his lips. He'd won this round, hadn't he? Hensley's career was ash, the truth a hammer swinging down. Then, the building shook, a boom rattling the walls, glass shattering upstairs as flames erupted through the barbershop's floorboards. Malik spun, Clara cursing as she grabbed her gun, shoving him toward a back hatch. "Go!" she yelled, smoke billowing, the heat a sudden wall. He hesitated, but she pushed, eyes fierce. "I'll hold 'em." He dove through, landing in an alley as the shop exploded behind him, a fireball swallowing the night, Clara's silhouette lost in the blast. His stomach dropped, grief clawing his chest. She'd saved him, died for it, another soul Hensley'd claimed. He stumbled back, coughing ash, the alley spinning as choppers buzzed overhead, their lights slicing through the smoke. A radio crackled nearby, Hensley's voice cutting sharp. "Jackson's alive, torched a barbershop, arson, murder, pin it." On him. Malik froze, the frame-up slamming home. Clara's death wasn't just revenge, it was Hensley's next lie, twisting her sacrifice into his guilt. Sirens wailed closer, the city a noose tightening again. He'd exposed Hensley, rallied the crowds, but the cops struck back harder, deadlier, framing him for her blood. Malik ran, legs shaking, the alley a blur as choppers circled, their rotors a relentless drumbeat. Clara's face burned in his mind, her steel, her fire, gone in a flash to shield him. He'd thought the broadcast would end it, break Hensley's grip, but it had only enraged him, unleashed a beast unbound by law. The city cheered his name, but the cops hunted him still. Hensley's lies a venom spreading fast. How many more would fall? Who'd believe him now? He slipped into a storm drain, mud soaking his wounds, defiance a faint pulse in the dark. Hensley'd pay, even if it took his last breath. Malik Jackson trudged through Chicago's industrial sprawl, the dawn sky a bruised gray over the rusted skeletons of abandoned steel mills lining the river's edge. His body was a map of pain, shoulder throbbing from the sniper's graze, calf leaking blood from the mob's bullet, ribs a jagged ache from days of beatings, all wrapped in a mud-caked hoodie that clung like a shroud. Clara's death burned in his chest, her shop's explosion a fresh wound, Hensley's latest frame-up, twisting her sacrifice into his guilt. The city hummed with unrest, protests raging downtown, choppers buzzing. But here in the shadows of Cicero Avenue, it was just him, a ghost plotting his last stand. He'd slipped the storm drain an hour back, dodging SWAT sweeps and mob stragglers, their chants of arsonist echoing in his ears. Hensley's lies had spread fast, the barbershop blast pinned on him, another nail in a coffin built from racism and greed. But Malik wasn't running anymore. He'd lost too much, Rico. Clara his cover to let Hensley win. The steel mill loomed ahead, a hulking relic of beams and broken cranes, its yards strewn with scrap and silence. He'd scouted it months ago for the op, knew its maze of catwalks and shadows. This was his ground, his trap. He slipped inside, the air thick with rust and oil, and found a crate of junk, bolts, wire, a dented propane tank. His hands moved fast, rigging a fake stash, bags of flour labeled Coke, a burner phone with a pre-typed text. He sent it to a number ghosts. Crew used, intercepted weeks back. Hensley's flipping, meet at mill, Cicero dawn. Products here. Then he dialed Torres's old line, knowing Hensley'd tapped it since her betrayal. "Victor, it's Jackson. Cicero mill, got ghost stash. Come take it." He hung up, voice a baited hook, planting seeds of doubt too. Draw them both. Malik climbed a catwalk 30 feet up, crouching behind a rusted girder, the fake stash below like a beacon. His stolen gun was gone, lost in the safehouse rubble, but he'd nabbed a crowbar from the yard, its weight a cold comfort in his grip. Minutes ticked by, the mill's silence a held breath. Then engines growled outside, tires crunching gravel. Hensley rolled in first, black jacket swapped for his uniform, badge glinting as he stormed through the bay door, pistol drawn, eyes wild. "Jackson," he bellowed, voice bouncing off steel. "Show yourself, you bastard!" Ghost followed, wiry frame slinking in, shark eyes darting, a silver chain glinting at his throat. Two goons flanked him, Uzis slung low, their steps cautious. Hensley spun on him, face red. "What's this? You said he's dead." Ghost smirked, voice smooth. Your bomb failed, Victor. Now he's got my product. You're slipping. Hensley's gun wavered, fury cracking his smug mask. He's bluffing, playing us. I'll end him, then we're square. Malik watched, pulse steady. Their distrust a spark he'd fanned into flame. He dropped a bolt, clanging loud against the floor, drawing their eyes up. Right here, he called, voice echoing, stepping into view, crowbar loose at his side. Hensley fired a wild shot, pinging off the girder, sparks flying as Malik ducked. Ghost barked at his goons, "Take him!" But Malik was already moving, sliding down a beam, landing hard near the stash. He swung the crowbar, cracking a goon's wrist, the Uzi skittering away as the man howled. The second lunged, but Malik sidestepped, slamming the bar into his knee, dropping him with a crunch. Hensley charged, pistol raised, but Malik dove, tackling him into the crate, flour bags bursting in a white cloud. The gun flew, clattering across concrete, and Malik pinned him, wrenching his arm back, cuffing one wrist to a pipe with the SWAT cuffs he'd kept from the sting. "You're done," he growled, blood dripping from his brow onto Hensley's snarling face. Ghost lunged then, a knife flashing, but Malik rolled, kicking the blade free, pinning him with a knee to the chest. He cuffed Ghost's hands tight, the steel biting as the kingpin thrashed, spitting venom. Malik stood, chest heaving, the mill a haze of dust and groans. Hensley tugged at the pipe, face purple, while Ghost glared, helpless. "Feds are coming," Malik said, pulling his burner, dialing a field office line he'd memorized. "Agent Jackson, Cicero Mill. Got Hensley and Ghost, recorded proofs public, send backup." The dispatcher crackled. "Units en route." And Malik exhaled, victory a bitter tang in his mouth. He'd outsmarted them, turned their greed against them, locked them down. Hensley's empire was crumbling, Ghost's too. He'd won, hadn't he? Then Hensley laughed, a low, guttural sound that chilled Malik's spine. "You're so smart, huh?" he rasped, free hand slipping to his belt, revealing a small black box, a dead man's switch, wired red, blinking fast. "Bombs under the floor, Jackson. I die. It blows. Whole block goes up." Malik froze, eyes darting to the concrete, a faint hum vibrating beneath. Ghost's smirk widened. "You're screwed, Fed." Malik lunged, prying at the switch, fingers slick with sweat, tracing wires to a panel under a crate. He yanked it. Open. A tangle of circuits and a timer, 10 seconds, 9-8. He grabbed the crowbar, smashing the box from Hensley's grip, slicing wires blind, heart hammering as the timer hit 2, then stopped, the hum dying. He slumped, breath ragged, the bomb silenced. Hensley's last card played and burned. "Nice try," he spat, kicking the switch away, turning to Ghost, who'd gone pale, bravado gone. Sirens wailed outside, feds closing in. He'd done it. Disarmed the beast, cuffed the devils. Then the bay doors rattled, not feds but a dozen of Ghost's crew storming in, Uzis blazing. A hail of bullets tearing through the air as Malik dove behind a beam, the trap flipping one last time. Hensley cackled, pipe rattling. "Told 'em you'd be here, Jackson. My insurance." Ghost's men fanned out, a wall of firepower, their boss shouting, "Kill him now." Malik rolled, crowbar skittering, the feds minutes away but too late. He'd beaten Hensley, stopped the bomb, only to face this. A crew tipped by the cop's final jab, a death squad to finish what the switch couldn't. His body screamed, blood pooling, but he scrambled, defiance a fading pulse. Hensley'd lost the game but rigged the end, and Malik was cornered, the mill a battlefield he might not leave. Malik Jackson flattened himself behind a rusted steel beam, the Cicero Mill's cavernous interior erupting into a storm of gunfire as Ghost's crew advanced, Uzis spitting lead that ricocheted off metal with piercing shrieks. His body was a wreck, shoulder oozing from the sniper's graze, calf pulsing blood from the mob's shot, ribs a throbbing cage from weeks of beatings, all screaming as he gripped the crowbar, his only weapon in the chaos. Bullets chewed the beam, sparks flaring inches from his face, the air thick with cordite and dust. Hensley's cackle echoed from the pipe where he was cuffed. "You're dead, Jackson," while Ghost, cuffed beside him, barked orders, "Finish him!" Malik rolled, pain a white-hot lance through his side, snatching the Uzi dropped by a goon he'd downed earlier, its clip half full. He popped up, squeezing off 3 rounds, catching a thug in the chest, the man crumpling with a gurgle as the others scattered, diving behind crates. 12 against 1, odds stacked high, but Malik had faced worse. Cartel shootouts, ambushes in the dark. He slid along the beam, firing again, a second goon dropping, blood pooling on the concrete. The crew hesitated, their Uzis chattering wild, bullets pinging off steel as Malik ducked low, crawling through shadows to a stack of barrels. He vaulted over, landing hard, his calf buckling but holding as he flanked them, popping up to nail a third, the shot clean through the throat. 9 left, fanning out, their shouts a mix of rage and panic. Hensley's voice cut through. "He's one man, you idiots, waste him." Malik's lips twitched, a grim flicker. He'd turned their trap into his fight, their numbers into chaos. He grabbed a loose bolt, hurling it across the mill, the clang drawing fire as he sprinted, diving behind a crane, Uzi barking to drop a 4th, the body slumping against a girder. Bullets grazed his arm, a fresh sting, but he ignored it. Adrenaline, drowning the pain. 5 down, 7 to go, the crew tightening, their steps thudding closer. He lunged, tackling a 6th, wrestling the Uzi free and slamming the butt into the man's skull, a dull crack silencing him. 6 left, circling, but sirens wailed outside, sharp and close, feds finally rolling in. Malik fired, clipping a 7th in the leg, the man howling as he fell, and the rest froze, heads snapping toward the bay doors bursting open, SWAT storming through in a flood of vests and rifles. "Drop." "It?" a Fed bellowed, and the crew hesitated, then complied, Uzis clattering as agents swarmed, cuffing them fast. Malik stood, chest heaving, blood dripping from his arm, the crowbar slipping from his grip to clang on the floor. Hensley tugged at his cuffs, face purple, snarling, while Ghost glared, silent, his shark eyes dimmed. 2 agents grabbed Malik, supporting his weight as a third uncuffed Hensley and Ghost, slamming them into restraints, their wrists bleeding from the steel. "Agent Jackson," a Fed said, voice crisp, "you're clear. We've got the broadcast, the tape, all of it." "They're done." Malik nodded, relief a bitter flood, his legs wobbling as they hauled him toward a medic van outside, the mill's chaos fading behind him. Hensley spat curses. "This ain't over!" But Ghost stayed mute, head bowed, empire shattered. Thus he. Feds had swept in, secured the scene, and Malik's name echoed through the radio, hero, not traitor. Protests roared louder outside. "Justice for Jackson!" Shaking the dawn as medics patched his shoulder, his calf, his arm. The pain a dull hum beneath the victory. He'd fought off the crew, held the line, won the war, hadn't he? Then an agent leaned in, a wiry woman with a tight bun, voice low. "Torres ran Jackson. Slipped the net last night. Word is she's Ghost's sister, blood, not just payroll." Malik froze, ice flooding his veins, the medic's needle pausing mid-stitch. Sister. Torres's shaky lies, her quick cash grab, snapped into place. A deeper betrayal, a family tie he'd never sniffed. She'd sold him out, fed Hensley his every move, and now she was loose. A phantom with Ghost's resources, her brother's wrath in her hands. His win soured, a hollow shell cracking open. He slumped back, the stretcher creaking, the agent's words a blade in his gut. Hensley and Ghost were cuffed, their empires dust. But Torres, Elena, his handler, his betrayer, was the shadow he'd missed, a thread still dangling. Medics wheeled him out, the city a blur of flashing lights and cheering crowds. His name, a chant on their lips. He'd cleared it, beaten the odds, but the twist gnawed at him, a war not fully won. Then his burner buzzed, a number he didn't know, and he flipped it open, Hensley's voice hissing through, warped but clear. "I've got friends everywhere, Jackson. Watch your back." Malik's breath caught, eyes darting as the line went dead, a chill sinking into his bones. Hensley, cuffed and hauled away, had slipped one last dagger, a call from inside, a threat from beyond. A shot rang out nearby, sharp and sudden, blood, pooling on the pavement 10 feet off, an agent slumping, clutching his chest. Malik jolted upright, pain flaring, scanning the crowd. Chaos erupted, screams swallowing the cheers, feds scrambling. Who'd fired? Hensley's friends? Torres's hand? A new player? His war wasn't over. It was sprawling, a hydra growing. Heads. He limped from the stretcher, shoving past medics, badge clutched in his fist, eyes burning with a vow. Torres was out there, ghost's kin, a ghost of her own, and Hensley's reach stretched even from a cell. The agent's blood stained the ground, a fresh mark on Malik's tally, and he knew it. This victory was a door, not an end, opening to a fight bigger, darker than he'd dreamed. He slipped into the crowd, a battered warrior, the city's hero and its hunted, ready to chase the shadows that wouldn't let him rest. Malik Jackson's saga in Racist Cop Arrests Black Man, but then realizes he's an FBI agent, unveils a brutal truth. Systemic racism isn't just a personal flaw. It's a machine that thrives on power, corruption, and betrayal. Hensley's relentless pursuit wasn't mere prejudice. It was a calculated war to protect a criminal empire, exposing how bias can twist justice into a weapon against the innocent. Malik's resilience, outsmarting frame-ups, mobs, and bombs, shows that survival demands more than strength. It requires cunning and an unyielding will to fight back. Torres' twist as Ghost's sister hammers home the lesson that trust can be a luxury, even among allies when greed and loyalty collide. The story also reveals the cost of resistance. Clara's sacrifice and Rico's death underscore that standing. Against injustice often claims lives, yet their losses fueled Malik's push for truth, proving that change, however slow, starts with those willing to pay the price. Hensley's final threat, even from custody, warns that evil doesn't vanish with a single victory. It adapts, lurks, and strikes again. Malik's journey teaches us to question authority, challenge assumptions, and recognize that real justice isn't handed down. It's clawed out of the dirt by those who refuse to break. So what do you think? Can one person's fight topple a corrupt system, or does Hensley's lingering shadow prove the battle's never truly won? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like if Malik's grit inspired you, and subscribe for more tales of defiance. Share this with anyone who believes in pushing back against the odds. Thanks for riding this roller coaster with us. Here's to courage in the face of chaos and hope for a world that learns from its scars.